Welcome to the Relaxed Dog Podcast, the podcast where the dogs are the stars of the show. Welcome to the Relaxed Dog Podcast, sponsored by The Relaxed Dog. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Robert Ober, and I hope that you and your dog are well. Our guest this week is my friend Karen Cobia, and she is going to tell us all about her whippet, Arizona, also known as Zass. But first, we'll get into a little bit of doggy news. Over to the US, and Orlando Bloom is inconsolable over his missing poodle Mighty. So a couple of days ago, don't know the details, Mighty is out and around, possibly in the Santa Barbara area. If you find Mighty, give Orlando a call. And over in Baton Rouge, a truck driver stopped to buy himself a donut, and in that short period of time, a woman jumped into the truck and drove off with it. And I don't know whether obviously she knew inside the truck was the truck driver's Labrador Weimaraner Cross Roja. Unfortunately, the woman then left the truck, left the windows and everything closed, and unfortunately Rohi passed away due to heat exhaustion. Now, they did catch up with that woman, and she is now serving 12 years behind bars. 10 years of that, the judge said, was for aggravated cruelty to animals, and she got charged with a few other things as well. Over to Ireland, and if you're listening from Ireland, keep an eye on your dogs. Authorities are calling it an epidemic, but there has been a spate of dog thefts. One in particular that I came across was a Springer Spaniel by the name of Daisy and her 7 puppies. Now, the thieves broke into their home, took Daisy and her puppies, and then, for whatever reason, cut the microchip out of Daisy and then left her. Now, amazingly, she has been reunited with her carers, but unfortunately, none of her puppies have been found. And in a little bit more of a positive note, in Singapore, a lady by the name of Yo Chu Hun had to get put into a hospice for her health, and she was separated from her dog of 10 years company. Now, the people in the hospice, she was in there for a couple of weeks, they changed some rules and got the dog to come in and see her, and everybody enjoyed witnessing them being reunited. And now we'll go to our featured interview with Karen letting us know about Zass. Well, welcome everyone. My guest is my friend Karen, and she is going to tell us all about her whippet, Zass. Welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thank you. You probably want to know how I got Zass and how she got a name. She's she's probably the only purebred dog I've owned and bought from a breeder. We generally have rescues. And Zass has got some very long pedigree name, which is very hard to pronounce. But when she came to us as a pup, we did name her Arizona. But for some reason that didn't last, and she's ended up with Zass. So she came to us. As I said, we've always had rescues, and she came to join our household. We already had a couple of other dogs, plus various other rescues at all times. So she was joining a household where there were multiple other dogs, dogs coming and going. She came to us when she was about 3 months old because we'd had a parvo scare with one of the dogs that we'd brought in as a rescue. So we wanted to wait until she was fully vaccinated and everything was okay, just to make sure she was going to be fine and not catch anything. So
Okay, so she stayed with the breeder. So you'd already gone to see her?
yes, we went and visited her a couple of times. So we were living not far from Canberra, and the breeder was at Yass, and we went and visited a couple of times. But the breeder, the dogs were kept in kennels, although the breeder assured us that, they brought the puppies inside regularly and they were handled and everything. So that was fine. I guess one of the reasons I was looking at whippets, I'd already had some rescued greyhounds, and I would often foster greyhounds. I didn't initially start fostering greyhounds, but once I met one, I kind of fell in love with them, and I have one now. I think I'll always have a greyhound, but they're not lap dogs. And I thought, it'd be nice to have a smaller dog that I could just sort of cuddle up with on the couch, maybe a bit of a lap dog. And I thought, well, whippets, they're very similar to greyhounds, and I like my greyhounds, so we might try a whippet. So I got this whippet, and she absolutely hates being picked up. She has her entire life. And I thought, is this typical of whippets? And I've since talked to other people who own whippets and said, no, your whippet's broken. They generally love, cuddling up on your lap and being picked up. And she just does not, even to this day, she does not like being picked up. The house we're living in now has got quite steep stairs, and as she's getting to be a little old lady, she's got a little bit unsteady on her feet. So if we want to go upstairs, I tend to carry her up and down. So she's learnt to tolerate being picked up when she wants to go upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, if you do try and pick her up and hold her, she sort of thrashes around and tries to get down. And yes, so that's my lap dog who doesn't like sitting on your lap.
It's only taken a few years to get to that stage.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's a funny girl. She didn't like people much when she was younger. She was always one of those dogs who was very, very wary of people she didn't know, to the point that if, a stranger come up and tried to pat her, she'd try and run away or hide. She didn't like interacting with people she didn't know. However, surprisingly enough, in her old age, as she's gotten older, that's gotten much better, to the point now if we have visitors to the house, she'll actually run up to them and, put a paws on them and go up for a pat. And we just look at her because we're so used to this dog who never wanted to have anything to do with people that she didn't know. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure whether it's old age or she's getting a bit senile. I don't know. But she's actually decided that she likes people now, which is, we still think it's odd because we were so used to this dog who didn't like anybody that she didn't know, didn't want to have anything to do with people outside the family.
So you've mentioned old age. How old is Zass now?
She's 11. She was 11 in March.
Okay.
Which for a small dog is not terribly old, but, she's showing some signs of aging.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take us back a little bit to, say, the initial introduction into the household. So she's 3 months old, and then how did she find her way into because you had an established pack back then as well, wasn't it?
Yes. So we had an established pack. We had 3 other dogs, much bigger dogs. She's the smallest dog we own and has been all along. And we had often multiple fosters coming and going. So I don't recall any sort of real integration problems. She was pretty much just thrown in with everybody else. It was kind of, this is it, kid. So we didn't sort of take too much care in introducing her. She just had to join the pack and get along with everyone else. Now, funnily enough, she's quite a dominant little girl. So when we got her, I had a rescued Staffy Cross, Hazel, who was the matriarch of the household. And Hazel was the boss of all the dogs, plus all the foster dogs. She was one of those dogs that didn't do much. She was quite quiet, She wasn't particularly aggressive, but she was obviously very good at getting the message across that she was the boss. Nobody messed with her. So, Arizona came into that household, Arizona being her formal name, Zass, as we call her most of the time. So she came into that household and she sort of fitted in quite happily. There was sort of never any issues. She didn't sort of challenge for dominance. But later on down the track, after Hazel had passed, Arizona sort of gradually ended up being top dog in the household. And I don't really foster these days. I haven't for a while. And currently we only have 3 dogs, but she's the boss. And she has been for quite some time now. I used to have 2 big male greyhounds, rescued boys. They've both now passed on. And we had little Zass. And she was the boss of both of the big boys. She can walk underneath. She was, she's so little she could just walk straight underneath them.
Yeah.
But she was the boss. Even though she wasn't the oldest, I think one of them was older than her. But now currently we have a 4-year-old rescued greyhound female. She's actually at the bottom of the pecking order. And we have a rescued Staffy Cross, a male. He's about 6 years old. They're all pretty placid dogs, but you can see it when they get fed. Zass is very picky with her food, and she doesn't always finish it. But none of the other dogs are allowed to take it, even if she doesn't want it. They're not allowed to have it. And she'll stand over her bowl, and she just stands there and gives the other dogs this look. And I mean, as I said, she's the smallest of our dogs, but she just stands there in front of her bowl and looks at them, and they just turn around and walk away. But what I end up having to do is, because she won't finish hers, but she won't let them have it, she'll guard it until I decide that, okay, you've obviously had enough, and I pick it up and take it away. And as soon as I move the bowl, she goes and lies down, and we're all okay then. But until I move the bowl so that nobody else takes her food, she just stands there glaring at them if they come anywhere near her.
Does she do this any sort of like resource guarding with other things, with toys or anything like that, or?
No, only her food bowl.
Only the food?
Yeah. And we've never had skirmishes over it, which amazes me when there are other bigger dogs and they want her food. As I said, she just stands there and sort of stares at them until they back down. Yes.
So when she was younger, as far as like taking the dogs out and for walks and exercise, are all sort of like going together, or how did you manage that?
When she was younger, we didn't. I had lived on almost acreage, so like a huge block. So we didn't, and I had lots of dogs, as I said, with her and the others, and dogs coming and going. So she didn't get walked particularly regularly. But when I walk dogs, because I've always had many, it's usually multiples. But certainly the last few years she gets walked very frequently. We walk most days now. And it used to be her, and I had 2 greyhounds. My big greyhound boy, who sadly passed away, he had a heart problem. He was only 7. And he passed away earlier this year. But I used to walk the 2 greyhounds and the whippet, all 3 of them together. Funny thing, if you've noticed, if you walk dogs, they have this like set pattern. One walks on the left, one walks on the right, the other one walks in the middle. They get in this little, like they all have their spot, or that's what I've noticed anyway. So now, though, it's only the 2 girls. The greyhound I have, her name's Sky. She's quite excitable for a greyhound. Most greyhounds are really cruisy and tend to be laid back. Sky's a bit more bouncy than your average greyhound. But all greyhounds, if they see something that excites their interest, can become quite excited. So Sky, if she sees, she's all right with birds now, but if she sees a cat or something, she gets quite excited. And I walk them on a loose lead. So if she sees the cat before I realise, she'll start bouncing around. She'll actually bark. Greyhounds aren't big barkers, but Sky will bark.
Not a lot, no.
So she sees let's say a cat, she starts bouncing around and barking. And Zass, the little whippet, knows that that's naughty and we're not allowed to do that. So she has a go at her and tells her off for barking and being naughty. She's enforces enforces behavioural rules. But generally they're pretty good. We walk on a loose lead. We go most mornings, not far or fast, because I let them go at their pace and they like to sniff things and wander. But I was saying to someone the other day, we take the same route every day. And someone said, oh, why don't you vary it up? I said, well, I could, but the dogs are really creatures of habit and they get used to going a certain way. So if you actually try and go a different direction, they're all like, kind of like, what are you doing? We don't go that way. We go this way. So, yes, they're funny.
I was going to say, when she was younger, having an acreage would be great for her to run around here and have those sort of like zoomies.
Yes. And the funniest thing, because ever since I had her, I've always had greyhounds. And, of course, greyhounds and the whippet all love to do zoomies. And while the greyhounds are technically faster than a whippet, and I'm sure on the straight they probably would be, she corners much tighter than a greyhound does.
Mm-hmm.
So she could usually, she'd often be, what I'd say, be the bunny. When you see sighthounds play, it's quite a different style of play to say, we've had staffies which like to wrestle. The greyhounds don't wrestle, they like to chase, and they kind of like pick one dog and they chase that dog. So she was often the dog that was being chased, and I used to worry sometimes in case everybody got a bit overexcited, but she had her little tricks. I mean, apart from the fact that she could corner quicker than them and generally keep ahead of them that way, she also knew, I'd seen her do it when everyone was getting quite excited. She would drop to the ground and just lay there really still. And so the other dogs would run over. And if you've ever had a greyhound or a sighthound, they only want to chase something that's moving. As soon as it stops moving, they generally lose interest. So from a very young age, she seemed to have realised that if she just dropped and stayed really still, they'd look at her and then they'd all go, oh, well, you're no fun, and they'd all wander off.
Get bored, yeah. No, very smart, very intuitive.
She had that, but we also had a water tank up on a raised stand, which was just big enough for her to fit under, but not for the greyhounds to fit under and crawled in. So that was also, if they were getting a bit close, she'd duck in under there so they couldn't.
The safety zone.
Yeah, but yes, she certainly was more nimble, much more nimble than the greyhounds.
Did she ever sort of like turn the tables and do chasing herself, or she enjoyed being the one that's chased? I know different dogs have different preferences.
Yeah, I never actually saw her chase the bigger dogs. So it always seemed to be that she was the bunny. That's what I probably shouldn't say that. It probably has bad connotation. But she was the one that was usually being chased, but she seemed to enjoy it, and she'd often initiate it. The really funny thing, though, is while I've always had greyhounds, I've also always had a staffy cross in the mix somewhere, and she loves to play with our staffy cross, Ollie, and she will actually pretty much wrestle with him. So she has adapted her playing style to his, which I find really interesting. And she still loves to play now, even though she's getting older, and she often initiates play. When we first got him, when he was a pup, he was quite rough in his play, and I was worried that he would hurt her because he's a sizable dog. Even as a pup, he was not a tiny little thing, and he used to play with her quite rough. And there were times where I used to keep an eye on it and I'd just separate them because I thought he was getting too rough. But as he's gotten older, he's also become much more gentle. Often when they play, he lies on the ground and sort of wrestles from a lying on the ground position while she's the one who's sort of on top. But, she wants him to play and he'll be sitting there minding his own business. So she'll go up and start chewing on his back leg. She's often the one that initiates it, but he seems to join in, and most days they'll have a play and they get quite noisy. That's another thing. Sighthounds don't tend to be very noisy when they play, but if bully breeds are often noisy. In fact, people who aren't used to it can get quite nervous because they're they growl a lot and they're vocal. So over the years of her playing with him, she's actually the noisy one now. She makes a noise growling in a, because I'm working from home and they're often in the same room as me. I've had a couple of occasions where I've been in a Zoom meeting and I've had to put them outside because they're making so much noise. I've had to say to people, it's okay, it's just my dogs, they're just playing, it's fine.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think it's funny how her play style has changed over time to adapt to her favourite playmate.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So, she got any favourite places to go?
Inside the house or outside the house?
Oh,
Or anything?
anything.
She does like to go for her walks. As I said, we sort of follow the same path and we go. I'm in a suburban area, but in a quieter, like a cul-de-sac, and we go through there and there's a bit of a park, so we have a wander around the park. She enjoys that. When we're home, she likes sleeping on my bed if I let her in there.
Mm-hmm.
But she also likes sunbaking. So we've already had to have a few little lumpy things removed, unfortunately, because she's a white with patches of like a pale brindle, but she loves sunbaking. She really feels the cold. She has multiple outfits and coats and pajamas, and she seems to like wearing clothes. But she also likes, if there's any sunshine at all outside, you'll find her outside in a little curled up asleep in a sunny spot in the garden. That's sort of her favourite.
Nice. So,
Yeah.
inside, you mentioned on the bed. Is there any
Mm.
competition with the other dogs in the household for that, or do they have separate rules?
Where we used to live before, they were never allowed in the bedroom, so it was never really an issue. But where we are here, and because I've been home, working from home for several months now, I was trying to keep them all out of the bedroom, but I kind of gave up. Sometimes I forget to close the door to the bedroom and then they'll sneak in. So, yeah, it does have competition because Sky, the greyhound, would spend all day sleeping on the bed if she could. And if Sky's up on the bed first and Zass goes to jump up. Now, this is the only time where the rules are reversed and Zass is not the boss. Sky will growl at her when she goes to jump up on the bed. So I usually just keep an eye on that and tell Sky that Zass is also allowed on the bed and she can just stop growling. Yeah, and Ollie, the Staffy Cross, joins them in the bed sometimes. He tends to like, if I have the door open, Zass and Ollie will both sort of wander in and out, whereas Sky, like most of the greyhounds I've had, really prefers to be an indoor dog, and most of the greyhounds I've had only go outside to go to the toilet. The rest of the time, if they have their choice, they'd much rather be inside on a nice cozy bed, preferably my bed if they can get in there.
I think that's a bit of a misconception a lot of people have, but they're really just big lounge lizards.
Oh gosh, yes. Even Sky, who, as I said, is a bit more active and bouncy than other greyhounds, still loves to spend the majority of her time sleeping on a nice cozy bed. Yeah.
Nice. So, what about say water? Does Zass like swimming or?
No, she's not
No?
a fan. No, and I've tried getting like a kiddie pool, like the shell pools to put in the backyard for summer when it's really hot. If any of the dogs, none of the dogs I currently have like to get in the water, although I have had other dogs that have. But Zass is very funny. For a long time, we lived near Canberra, and sometimes that little pool would have a thin layer of ice on the top of it. She actually likes to eat the ice off the top of the water.
Okay,
Doesn't like
yep.
swimming. Doesn't like swimming, but she would actually crunch on the little flakes of ice that were forming on top of the water in the cold weather. So strange.
Yeah, I can understand that on a hot day.
Yeah, she has some idiosyncrasies. She does. We have a bit of an issue with separation anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
which we really discovered, not so much when she was young, but at one point where we moved house, and we moved to a new place which she was unfamiliar with, and everyone went out. Like, it was one of those things where we're moving and then we've got to start work straight away the next day. And she's, in her younger days, not now, but in her younger days, she was quite the escape artist. She can jump really high and she can climb. So she got left in this strange house all alone and took off. Came home and there was no dog. Well, there was one dog. She disappeared. She actually went missing for about a week.
Wow, a week.
Yeah, this is about 7 years ago. I was frantic, and we were looking everywhere for her. Had Facebook and that then, so we were posting everywhere we could. And people, at this stage, it was when she didn't really like people, so we were getting these sightings. People were seeing this little dog because she'd run away wearing red pajamas. So, you know, a little
Okay. Yep.
red pajamas running around the neighborhood and people were saying, "Oh yes, we saw her here and we saw her there." Finally, I had a lady say, "Oh, I've seen her down." The lady lived in like a suburban house, but backed onto a property. She said, "Oh, I've seen your little dog around." And when we went there and called her, she came running almost immediately. She must have been living on this in some scrub on this property. So that's not the only time she's escaped. There was another time she was.
What sort of condition was she in after a week?
She wasn't too bad after a week. She seemed to have been survived okay. She was obviously finding something to eat and water, you know. So she was all right. Yeah, she had this bad habit. So another time she jumped the fence and was gone for 3 days. It was a bit tricky because when we moved from our own home into a rental, and strictly speaking, the lease said the dogs are meant to be outside. So once she got used to that property, it was okay. But we realized that she didn't like being outside once it got dark if there was nobody home. So she was fine to be outside in the yard during the day and we could go out. But if it got dark and nobody was home, then she'd jump the fence and go looking for company, we think.
Okay, yep.
No, we had some issues. We tried all sorts of things. In the end, I made sure that if no one was going to be home, she had access to the house, because if she could get inside once it went dark, she was fine. The other thing is thunderstorms. She doesn't like thunderstorms. So, you know, she had to have access to the house. So we ended up not doing strictly what the lease said, because she always had to have access to the house, because otherwise if she got scared or upset, she'd just jump the fence and disappear.
So did she come home by herself after the 3-day holiday?
No, someone handed her into a local vet.
Oh, okay. There's the value in having a dog chipped.
Yes, definitely. There were other times where she'd just disappear overnight and come back in the morning. You know, it was sort of an ongoing thing with her, and I tried. It's very difficult when you're renting. I couldn't just rip all the fences down and replace them with 6-foot colour bond. So I tried various things to try and deter her from jumping out, which didn't always work so well. But we found as she got older, she just sort of stopped. And now, as I said, she's a little bit wobbly on her legs, which the vet doesn't seem too concerned with, but she doesn't. And we've moved again now to a place which does have 6-foot colour bond fences. So, but she eventually stopped. But it was always, I don't know, I've heard trainers say that fence jumping is something that's very hard to stop dogs from doing. Yeah. So we sort of worked around it as much as we could.
I don't know if you know now, there's a relatively new sport, GRC, and one of the events in it is a wall climb, and it sounds like Zass would have done great in that, just to run charge and run up a wall.
She would, yes. I remember once or twice going away on holidays and putting the dogs in kennels. Didn't happen very often, but I think twice I put them in kennels over a period of many years, but I had to make sure that the kennels were completely enclosed with a roof, etc. Because I said otherwise, if you just got to run without a roof, she'll get out. But it wasn't worth doing because she got so stressed, and she'd come back in poor condition because she just wouldn't eat, and so we just didn't do that. For many years, I didn't do holidays. Now if I want to go somewhere, I'll get a house sitter and the dogs can stay at home and someone comes and minds them. That works so much better than putting them in. It's actually cheaper than putting them in kennels if you've got several dogs, because kennels charge by the dog, where house sitters usually just give you a set fee, and the dogs are much happier if they can just stay in their familiar surroundings.
Sounds like a good strategy to have.
Yeah.
So does she have any favourite toys or games that she likes to play?
Oh, yes. She loves pillow pets.
You left a pillow pets. You'll have to tell me what pillow pets is.
Pillow pets are a soft toy for children. And they're like a pillow, but they sort of got a head. They look, sort of like an animal usually. Mm-hmm. We've got a selection. We've got a horse and a ladybird and a pig. And so they're meant for children. So they're kind of like something that they can snuggle up and sleep with, but also like a toy. And they're that kind of very soft plush. So we discovered at one point, I don't know how, that she really likes these pillow pets. So they don't actually sell them anymore. When I realized that, I scoured eBay and secondhand places, and I have a stash of about half a dozen that are put away so that when they eventually get destroyed, I've got a supply.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, so what does she actually do with the pillow pets?
Sometimes she'll wrestle with them, play with them, but she's quite gentle. She doesn't rip them. It's only I have to keep them away from the other dogs because the other dogs tend to rip them up. But she'll wrestle with them. She used to drag them outside. Thankfully, she doesn't seem to do that so much anymore because they'd end up getting covered in dirt and twigs and things. But then once she's finished wrestling with them, she'll actually sort of curl up and actually use them as a pillow and go to sleep with them. So, yeah, her favourite one at the moment is a horsey one.
So when you say favourite, does she actively pick a favourite one?
We've got two sort of out at the moment. So there's a horsey and there's a hungry caterpillar one. She doesn't seem to be very fond of the hungry caterpillar one. She doesn't play with it. She chooses the horsey every time. But yes, as I said, she has to have supervised play with them because if we leave them just lying around and the other dogs get them, they very quickly shred them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're her toys, and the other dogs aren't allowed to play with them.
Nice. So when you said that she took her quite some time to warm up to people.
Yes.
Different people that she sort of would yes and no, or it's just like a lot of people in general?
People in general. She's always been a real one-person dog, much more so than any of my other dogs. So she's very attached to me. She still prefers my company to pretty much anybody else. Although, as I said, she doesn't like being picked up or cuddled or fussed over. I think she's much more like a cat than a dog because she chooses when she wants affection. And she does this weird thing, she's always very pleased to see me when I've been out, and she actually comes and rubs up against my legs like a cat does. That's her preferred sort of form of affection rather than being picked up or cuddled or anything. She sort of just likes that. So me, my children, she thinks they're okay. Well, they're not children anymore. They're grown up now. She kind of thought they were okay. It was almost like she'd tolerate them, but I was her person. I do remember when she was quite young, my mum, who's now passed away, mum always loved dogs and lived in a different city. So when she'd come to visit, she was quite determined that she was going to win Zass over. So she'd always bring treats and make a fuss of her. And eventually she did make friends with Zass, and Zass was quite happy to see her, even though she didn't usually she wouldn't let other people touch her. You know, anyone that wasn't in the family, you couldn't touch her. Not that she never tried to snap or bite people, but she'd just like run away or hide, made it very obvious she didn't want anyone to touch her. So, yeah, but as I said, we still think it's strange now when my daughter's friends might come over and walk in and she'll run up to them and you know, put a paws on them and want to have a pat, because she was just not like that when she was younger. It's kind of changed gradually, but now she seems pretty happy to talk to anyone, which is really weird. I don't know why. I've got no idea why that changed. It's an odd thing.
So how's her life been, say, medically wise? Has she ever had any sort of issues?
Not really. She's had a couple of little lumpy things removed from her tummy, which is from lying out in the sun, none of which have been sort of cancerous. She's had a couple of accidents. One time when she jumped the fence, she got caught and she cut herself. She had to have surgery to repair that injury. And one other time, it was very strange. She's always gotten on with the other dogs here, but one day, I don't know what happened, one of the big greyhounds bit her. Only time that's ever happened. I wasn't in the room. I heard it, but I didn't see it, so I don't know what happened. But he actually injured her, and she had to go and have that. She had to have surgery and have that repaired as well. So she's had a couple of accidents. The only other odd thing is the bit of wobbliness in her legs, which my vet doesn't seem to think is much to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
She seems to have hyperflexion in her front ankle joints and sort of goes over on them. So occasionally she sort of stumbles or loses her balance a bit. But he said the best thing is making sure we continue going for walks and things, and that does seem to be good for her. But no, apart from that, no major health issues. She was desexed when she was about 6 months old because, well, she has a pedigree. I kind of toyed with the idea of maybe showing her, but decided that really wasn't my thing. And because we had different foster dogs coming and going, I decided that I didn't want to have to deal with her being on heat and keeping her separated from other dogs. Mm-hmm. So she was desexed at, I think she was just on 6 months old. Yeah, she's quite little for a whippet. She's on the small and slight side of the scale. I don't know, some people think that desexing early affects their growth, but I believe that she comes from a line of fairly small whippets anyway.
Okay. Yeah. And her shyness with people, did that have any sort of issues when you did have to go to see like the vet or anything else like that?
No, she's never really happy with it, but she's never, as I said, she's never been aggressive or she's obviously not very happy, but she doesn't get to the stage that it's a real issue. These days it doesn't seem to bother her so much now. She doesn't seem to mind going to the vet.
One of the questions I ask everyone is to complete the sentence, I can't believe my dog ate.
Oh, chocolate?
Chocolate, so, yeah. That's I've had that a couple of times.
Chocolate is one of her favourite things. She loves it.
Not good.
She has eaten it more than once in her lifetime, and I have to be very careful because she is adept at finding wherever I've hidden the chocolate. She can also open drawers and cupboards that aren't closed properly. We have discovered over the years. Mm-hmm. The big one, though, was the day I went to bed and left a backpack in the lounge room, which the dogs had access to, or the living area. And I knew there was chocolate in my backpack, but I'd made sure it was fully zipped up. And to come out in the morning, I do not know how a animal without opposable thumbs managed to undo a zipper and get chocolate out of a bag, but she did.
Okay.
So there you go. That's the thing that she eats that she really shouldn't.
Did that cause a vet trip?
No, surprisingly, most times she's only eaten it, or well, all times she's only eaten a small amount, and I've just kept a good eye on her, and she has not actually shown any sort of adverse reaction, which we were fortunate. We had, I remember a vet visit with one of our old staffies, though, that's now passed on because he managed to steal 3/4 of a family block of chocolate.
Ooh, yeah.
And he wasn't real well. He was fine, but I think he had a tummy ache.
Okay. So apart from the chocolate, she hasn't really got into anything she's not supposed to.
No, not really. I think we were talking earlier about my greyhound's fondness for eating cat poo, but no, Zass doesn't. Zass doesn't seem to seek that out as much as some of the other dogs I've had, which is a good thing. No, nothing. Oh, she eats dirt occasionally. That's very strange, and I looked that up. Apparently, it's not a completely uncommon thing and not bad unless they are doing it all the time. So occasionally she'll go in the backyard and scratch around a bit and eat a bit of dirt, which is very strange.
Okay. Is there any sort of things or habits that she has that when you say ask her to do something that she doesn't do it but sort of knows that she should?
Oh, yes. Yes, she's actually one of my naughtiest dogs. When she wants to, she will be very good, but she has this weird thing sometimes where she's out in the backyard sunbaking or doing something, and I might want her to come inside, and I will call her to come inside, and she just won't. She sort of stands there and looks at me and won't come in the house. And then if I go outside and try to get her, she'll run away. But the weird thing is, I discovered the easy trick because I'll go out and call her and she won't come. I'll say, right, stay out there. Then I walk inside and close the door. And as soon as I close the door, she comes running up the stairs at the back door.
Oh, that's not too bad.
It's almost like that game, you play with when you're children where someone turns their back and everyone has to sneak up, and then when you turn around, they stop. She does that. So if she's if she's up the backyard and I call her and she won't come and I go inside and close the door, but if I open it too early and look out before she's right near the door, she'll freeze and she'll just stop where she is and she won't come. And then I have to go in and close the door again and wait, and then she'll come back down to the back door. She's a strange.
No, she sounds like a lovely dog.
Oh, we love her, but I did dub her the evil whippet for a while because she certainly has a mind of her own.
Well, I was going to say thank you very, very much for sharing the life of Zass, or Arizona, if we should call her by her formal name. I was going to say I have enjoyed chatting very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me come and talk about Zass. I'm always happy to talk about my dogs. I like talking about them. I also enjoy talking to them. I figured instead of the crazy old cat lady, I was going to be the crazy old dog lady. So, thank you.
Can't go wrong with that. Thank you very much again. Take care.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the show. And if you did, why not tell a friend about it? And feel free to join our little Facebook community on the Relaxed Dog Podcast Facebook group. A little extra shout out. Thank you to our new listeners in Dublin, in Ireland, and in Boardman, USA. Until next week, stay safe and remember, your dog is family.